So, are people saying this is one of the best movies in MCU, huh? Well, you guys really sure about that?
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts and my...
He told me enough.
No, I. Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the 17th film of the MCU, the 17th film of the Infinity Saga. And it was the very first black lead of the MCU, and the first tribe-like hero of the MCU. Well, he was introduced in Cap Civil War, and he was played by an actor that sadly passed on. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. And you can tell by the costume, it's going to be for none other than 2018's Black Panther, directed by Ryan Coogler. So yeah, what's the plot of this? Well, after the events of Cap Civil War, Prince T'Challa returns home to that reclusive technology advanced African motion of Wakanda to ensure it's the country's new king. However, T'Challa soon finds that he is challenged to the throne from fractures within its own country. When two foes conspire to destroy Wakanda, the hero known as Black Panther must team up with CIA agent Everett K. Ross and members of the Aura Majeli, Wakanda's special forces, to prevent Wakanda from being dragged into a world war. Okay, I was gonna take my mask off because it's hard to read, because it's kind of hard to think in this thing. But yeah, I'll put it back on in the outro. But I just wanted to show that. But hey, I'll wear the rest of this. Anyway, how was the plot of this? How was this movie made? Well, in June 1992, Wesley Snipes announced his intention to make a film about Black Panther, and he began work on it by that August. Snipes felt that Africa had been portrayed poorly in Hollywood films previously, and that this film could highlight the majesty of the continent due to the character being noble and the antithesis of African stereotypes. Next July, Snipes planned to begin Black Panther after starring in Demolition Man in 1993. And a month later, he expressed interest in making sequels to the film as well. In January 1994, Snipes entered talks with the Columbia Pictures to portray Black Panther, and Black Panther co-creator Stan Lee joined the film by March and entered early development by May. Snipes had discussions with several different screenwriters and directors about the project, including Mario Van Peebles and John Singleton. In the film Not Progress by January 1996, Lee explained that he had not been pleased with the scripts for the project. And Snipes said that one of the issues with the project's development was confusion among those unfamiliar with the comics who thought the film was about the Black Panther Party. Then in July 1997, Black Panther was listed as part of the Marvel Comics' film slate, and in March 1988, Marvel reportedly hired Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti, who at the time were editors of the Black Panther comics, to work on it. Quesada and Palmiotti have been both denied this, and that August, corporate reports that Marvel put the project on hold. A year later, Snipes was set to produce and possibly star in the film, while Arts Entertainment announced a deal with Marvel and made Falcon to co-produce, finance, and distribute the film. Then in March 2002, Snipes began to make the film, or Blade 3, over the next year. In July 2004, Blade 3 director David S. Goyer stated that he felt Snipes starring as Black Panther in addition to Marvel's Blade might be overkill. To be honest, if Wesley Snipes' version of it made, it probably would have, I think it would have been good. But then, of course, Wesley Snipes randomly got sent to jail over silly taxes. For 3 years. Yeah, 3 years for freaking taxes. 3. But then in 2005, Marvel Chairman and CEO Avi Arad announced Black Panther is one of 10 films being developed by the new Marvel Studios, and Marvel Studios receiving financing to produce a slate of 10 films to be distributed by Paramount Pictures. In June 2006, Snipes said he hoped to have a director for the project soon. Our Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige reiterated in February 2007 that Black Panther was in development, and by that July, Singleton had been approached to direct the film. 2 months earlier, Fantastic Four director Tim Story expressed his interest in casting Digimon Hudson as Black Panther if he were to direct another Fantastic Four film after Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, but a third Fantastic Four film helmed that story went unproduced because it got cancelled. In March 2009, Marvel hired writers to help come up with creative ways to launch its lesser-known properties, including Black Panther. And Nate Moore, the head of the writers program, was overseeing the development of Black Panther specifically. Its development stayed stalled at this time. He was convicted of failing to file a tax return, and he served his sentence from 2010 to 2013. And then in January 2007, Marvel Studios hired documentary filmmaker Mark Bailey to write a script for Black Panther to be produced by Kevin Feige. And by October 2013, the metal vibranium, which comes from Black Panther's home nation of Wakanda, was introduced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel had considered showing Wakanda itself as early as Iron Man 2, but they waited until they had a full idea on how to depict it. Then in October 2014, Feige announced that Black Panther would be released on November 3rd, 2017, with Chadwick Boseman cast as T'Challa in Black Panther. Boseman did not audition for the role, instead discussing what he wanted to do with the part of Marvel, and earned $2 million for appearing in the film. The actor was set to first portray the character in Cap's Civil War, and Snipes gave his support to the project despite the fact he was no longer involved, so he had respect for that. Feige stated that Marvel has considered minority writers and directors for the film, but would prioritize the best filmmakers, best writers, best directors possible, so he was not going to say that they were going to hire from any one demographic. And they met with former Black Panther comics writer Reginald Hudlin. Then in January 2014, Boseman stated that the film was going through a brainstorming phase, and next month Marvel pushed back the release date to July 6, 2018. And also in February, Feige stated that casting for the film was underway, and that he was to meet with directors about the film following the release of Age of Ultron at the end of April. But we all know the movie instead ended up getting pushed back all the way to February 2018 earlier, because Ant-Man and the Wasp took the July 2018 release date. And we all know a certain film comes technically right after this, so it would make more sense. So after the film was shot and marketed, Black Panther premiered in Los Angeles on January 29, 2018, and was released theatrically in the United States on February 16, 2018 as part of Phase 3 of the MCU. It received some surprisingly high critical acclaim. It got the most critical acclaim of the MCU. They praised its direction, writing, acting, that of Boseman, Jordan, and Letitia Wright, costume design, production values, and soundtrack. But some criticized the computer-generated visual effects. Many critics considered the film to be one of the best in the MCU, and was noted for its cultural significances. Organizations such as the National Board Review and the American Film Institute named Black Panther as one of the top 10 films of 2018, and at the box office, it grossed a surprisingly huge $1.3 billion worldwide and broke numerous box office records, becoming the highest-grossing film directed by a black filmmaker, the 9th highest-grossing film of all time at the time, the 3rd highest-grossing film in the US and Canada at the time, and the 2nd highest-grossing film of 2018. And also, what's more, it got 7 award nominations at the Academy Awards, and won 3, and received numerous other accolades. One of them was even Best Picture. It was the first super film to even receive a Best Picture nomination, and was the first MCU to win several categories. A sequel got released in 2022, and a television series is in development for Disney+. Now, as for my reaction, well, I did remember loving this movie the first time I saw it, and did for a while, but as the years progressed, this film got very, very, very overrated. Hell, I don't think it even should have been remotely nominated for Best Picture in the first place, because there's many better superhero films that should have been nominated for that award instead, such as Logan, for example. Then again, the Oscars are most of the time known to be a joke when this movie came out. So yeah, this movie has went down quite a bit over the years, but I find it now just meh. It has amazing costumes, like the one I'm wearing. They really got the essence of the African cultures. The cast in general did a good job. It still had some problems though, including special effects, character development, They even wasted an actor like Forrest Whitaker in a really common narrative superhero story. In general, the movie's just fine, like I've stated earlier, but the truth is that professional critics judge this movie for the wrong reasons. They let their political interests overshadow their ability to rate a movie the way it's supposed to be. But the lead actor, though, Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace once again, who played T'Challa in Black Panther, did nail the parts of a good man, king, and warrior. He's probably my favorite Black Panther, or he was my favorite Black Panther. And the kingship channeled through his acting peaked in a scene where he raises his voice in front of the pristine Black Panthers to make a point to bring change, a point that challenges the orthodoxy of the preceding kings and Black Panthers. That's a sequence when the audience learned that the king has arrived, and Killmonger, the antagonist, was acted very well, and Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger brought a mean, maniacal destroyer look to him, which was enhanced by the upper body skills created by the makeup department. Each scar stood for a kill, and there may be a technical term for the scars like And Martin Freeman's character could have been more explored because his look was very similar to BBC Sherlock's Dr. Watson, and it was kind of weird to see him again after Civil War here. And there were multiple story arcs that are pondered upon in the film: the rise of a king, the revenge of an outcast without his fault, a general's loyalty towards throne, or a man sitting on the throne, a son dealing with demons created by his father, and many more. On a personal note, I think the art of Killmonger could have easily been taken to some direction. His character got such an enriched background and history that so much more could have been done with his character. Some of the visual effects were superb, like scenes like the entrance to Wakanda, the Dreamland and Limbo sequence, the Black Panther cave, the Vibranium Structure City stood out among the visual effects. And one decent thing was the comedy. The comedy that kind of erupts between the king and his sister Shuri, and between Dr. Watson and Manape, and Baku, were the ones that stood out for me. I mean, technically speaking, Everett Ross for Dr. Watson. And truthfully, for these African cultures unknown to the planet, they can be put on the world stage in a positive light through such an established franchise on such a big scale for the very first time. In a moment, both black and white America, the rest of the world couldn't be fully imagined. Just be an Africa, a language spoken by millions of South Africa on global display and stuff, apparel and heritage being put on the map, and then with this for Black Panther, it's kind of sentimental, and that's kind of both a good thing and a bad thing. Marvel Studios and Ryan Coogler didn't quite get the balance right. They focused just way too much on portraying a culture and used the Black Panther as its driving force, and pretty much neglected fleshing out Black Panther. So pretty much Black Panther was illustrated during a celebration that wasn't necessarily part of the Black Panther arc. That was a major problem. Africa deserved to be recognized by the world, and doing their Black Panther was right because of its magnitude and inspiration, but it was done wrong because of the equilibrium. All that aside, however, I do really love the rest of the cast, though. Specifically, some of their cast members like Lupita Nyong'o and Angela Bassett. And specifically, Letitia Wright, Michael B. Jordan, and Andy Serkis. They're just too amazing. Speaking of Andy Serkis, it's nice to see Alicia Clark come back after his last appearance in Age of Ultron, but he also feels pretty wasted here. And the visuals were stunning, but the pacing was off from time to time. The score was pretty good, and the story was more than satisfactory while the script was crisp. The plot was also kind of dull. Michael B. Jordan gives a good performance as Killmonger, and I understood his motives, and he was a pretty good villain, but I didn't get what Killmonger wanted to achieve and why. It just looked like revenge because his father was killed by T'Chaka. Then it was disappointing that Wakanda kept all the power for itself and didn't help others, and outside Wakanda to fight oppression. He just wasn't too impressive as a character, but not bad as a villain. Maybe he could have had more screen time, though. In Civil War, Chadwick Boseman excelled as King in Black Panther, but in this movie they kind of downgraded his character here. I kind of thought to see more of the African and Wakanda's culture and high tech, and then there was only Shuri as outstanding, but not portrayed too well at times either, and all was done so fast. Nobody was shown more than a few snippets at a time, and it was a come and go of characters, but there was no conviction and no suspense. And once again, I did find myself feeling times that it was a bit too fast paced, especially compared to some of the previous MCU films that did fast paced, but also evenly did it well. And little times when it's funny, usually revolving around T'Challa's younger sister Shuri, it usually hit the mark. And then of course, there's also kind of the editing, which also kind of turned me off, especially in the earliest fight scenes. Modern action films are plagued by fight scenes shot too tight on participants, which creates a kinetic energy, but here it just makes it difficult to determine what's actually happening. Although for me, this does stop in later fight scenes, but very unusually for the MCU films, the CGI was very subpar, especially in the climax battle. But with the good and great things, though, I'll get to the bad qualities later, rest of the bad qualities later, but with the good things, Black Panther is impressive visually, special effects are reliable, and there's some spectacular ones, and it's beautifully and stylishly shot, slickly edited, and sumptuously costumed. It's the extraordinary production design that was most noteworthy, and I love the use of technology, which was really cool. The music has the right amount of haunting, intensity, energy, dignity, and pathos, so a fine score on its own, but not always utilized right in the film. A few isolated moments mood-wise, and much of the action is exciting too, and there could have been more. There's a good deal of thought-provoking script writing with some nicely injected humor, and one is immersed in the world of Wakanda, which is a fascinating world in thematic terms. The story does grip once it does get going. It doesn't feel as confused and jumpy, with timeline location changes needing to be cleared, and like it did to begin with, a lot of it, even when turning on everyday struggles in their heads, is surprisingly relevant. And I did personally feel like much of the acting was actually pretty good here. With a very charismatic lead performance from Chadwick Boseman, Michael B. Jordan bringing a self-loved, conflicted edge and swagger to Killmonger, and Andy Serkis relishing his role with aplomb. The woman-edged swagger to Killmonger, and Andy Serkis relishing his role with aplomb again. The women characters here are just as good though, with a dignified Lupita Nyong'o, Regal, no nonsense, and feisty Dana Gurria are particularly a funny and endearing Letitia Wright here. And while his role small, Daniel Kaluuya is actually pretty great fun in it, and the direction is above competent, if not innovative, and really appreciated the filmmaking Killmonger more than the standard generic Marvel villain that MCU was known for creating before Phase 3. And here one with questionable personal motives, but one where you can see his point of view and empathize. Although his actions are inconsistent and don't always make sense, like he could have been more threatening, generally he's one of the better Marvel villains and the most developed character, a film too full of generic stock ones. The Tyler character being the other exception, though. And there were good points, like, once again, like with his other appearances as Black Panther, I really loved Chadwick Boseman as the Black Panther. I feel like Chadwick Boseman was just born to play the role. During the time we had him around, like, I don't think anybody else could have ever did him better. And he really did it well, too. Like, he didn't just play Black Panther as a character. He used it as, like, he even used it as a way to appreciate his own fans, too. Even his very younger fans, too. Like, he was actually... Like, he really made something out of the character and really made something with the last few years of his life. Doing such great things for his fans, even. Like, he was just one of the best actors around. And it's such a shame we got robbed of him. It sucks. Man, we could have had more appearances from him. He deserved to get to play the character a little more, even if the MCU wasn't that great around. He deserved to get to do more things with his career because he seemed like one of the best people in Hollywood. And I wanted a bit more from T'Challa though for this movie, and the plot was pretty weak, and many of the characters seem underdeveloped. And I feel like with many other Marvel movies, they try to at least make the characters and concepts somewhat plausible, but this one just felt too short. I mean, okay, I can accept that they got their power from vibranium, which came from a meteor, but I didn't like giving any feeling of how they utilized it to the extent they had. And Shuri just sometimes seems so wooden, but it's definitely the most funny of the characters. She does look like 16 or not much older, and it's supposed to be super intelligent Tuckman with all this out-of-this-world stuff, but she did not come across as a believable character in her field of expertise. She kind of just, most of the time she just comes off as just a teen that somehow just seems to know technology. I mean, at least with Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, you get to feel why they're so clever. And the cool things about the film with the weapons and tech easily, I think of all the sidekicks, Shuri was probably the best because she delivered humor as well as action, especially in the beginning scene with her first scene where T'Challa says he can't wait to see what upgrades she made to her outfit, and she just flips him the bird, and even like when she thinks her dress is uncomfortable and just wants to wrap up the ceremony and end it, or how about the infamous shoe scene? The real question is, what are those? Like, man. In playing the Queen, Angela Bassett delivered poise and grace, but again drawing on comparisons, like she could have been portraying this version of M from the James Bond 007 films too, and the whole tribal council thing felt like it was from a Star Wars film too, akin to the Jedi Council. And the plot was also average because it had already just been done before in many other films. In fact, I'm pretty sure this wasn't far off the plot of The Lion King. That was also one of the biggest letdowns for me. Like, not only had it been done before, but it was plagued with light, throwaway ideas that weakened it, and it didn't feel like a polished Marvel film that I was used to seeing, and certainly didn't feel as good as the critics have been raving about. I have an issue when superheroes fight practically identical carbon copies of themselves. Like, for example, one of the worst parts of Ant-Man was literally Ant-Man just fighting Yellowjacket as they were basically the same. Especially the bad part of Iron Man 3, one of the bad parts is where he's literally fighting just a bunch of carbon copies of his suits. Like, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's just lazy and cheap, and Black Panther sadly does exactly that. Just throw together two Black Panther suits, identifiable mainly by the varying shades used on the trim, and then the action scenes just look like lazy CGI dancing, something you'd expect to see a college computer design student make. On the topic of CGI, it was in abundance here. Like, usually Marvel does it in a way that the film looks natural enough, but this film was overused and it felt like at times like I was watching a cartoon. So with that being said, here come the bad qualities. Like I've already mentioned, there's not nearly enough character development, and the action sequences lack the punch. The final fight between Black Panther and Killmonger was a massive letdown. With as much ferocity as a 10-year-old stealing back his toys from his younger brother, it seemed to get over too fast, and it didn't do enough to instill emotion so the viewer could be emotionally invested and end up feeling each hit a lot more. For a film that purports to make a statement about moving to one human tribe, it is unconscionable that the two main white characters are portrayed as either evil post-colonial opportunists or at best a stumbling federal agent with so out of touch despite his connections to the events of Civil War, and he's just a dumbstruck and unable to comprehend quickly the state of Wakanda. And the two light anti-white male pejoratives were thrown around, which undermines the movie's message of moving forward and not grouping people or making assumptions of unfair associations. And most of the characters too are even stock and cliched. While some of the first half is too talky, the film was a little slow going, confused to start with, and some of the political elements are laid on too thick. And into the general feel that, even with the splashes of humor, the film takes itself too seriously, and with the amount of predictability it doesn't do enough with the new novel concept. It's just sometimes even a lot of it feels like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. The sci-fi parts feel quite like the stuff going on between Batman and Fox. The establishment of the character of Killmonger was similar to how he got introduced to the Joker in The Dark Knight, or to Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, and some scenes are quite similar to interrogation scenes of The Dark Knight. Not saying it's a rip-off of Nolan's Batman movies, because it might be the same in the source material they adopted, but noticing those themes being dealt with a similar way just made it kind of a mixed bag, and the movie even apparently kills off a character which doesn't feel so compelling because it kills off Ulysses Claw the minute they bring him back. I'm not kidding, guys. That's why I say they wasted Andy Serkis' character. So yeah, it's kind of stupid that you just bring him back from Age of Ultron just to kill him off. And some of the fight scenes are bad. Like, many fight scenes in this film are super cliched. Not only can you predict what will happen, you can even predict what kind of a dialogue will close that scene. And what will be the immediate consequence for the character who gave that piece of dialogue. And the third act of the movie was just plain generic third act of a superhero movie with a lot of cliches and dumbed down Captain America Civil War conditions with some kind of Lord of the Rings vibe. More importantly, though, how do Michael Bay's style fight scenes still exist in a world where genre choreography is available and Marvel money's on the table? Like, I hated the last 20 minutes of this film. Because, like, the CGI was not just, like, there was just some CGI'd war rhinos, which are shockingly bad, but the entirety of the final sequences were poor CGI. Poorly choreographed, and added absolutely nothing. In fact, half the CGI in this movie literally felt like a PS2 video game. A PS2 video game. Like, this is, like, even the other MCU movies do their CGI way better than films like this did. But if there's other things I forgot to mention, Everett Ross from Cap Civil War is back, and I did like they made him a lot more likable than he was in Cap Civil War, because I didn't really like him in Cap Civil War that much. But I kind of like they decently improved his character a little more here. And I did love the post-credit scene. The post-credit scene, like the very last one, as these kids go into a tent, but then they leave, they see some guy waking up, and guess who emerges out of the tent? Yes, guys, Bucky Barnes, fresh off his memory wipe, completely fresh off his deprogramming of Hydra's attacks, now normalized, awake, and he goes out to start farm work, showing that the whole process is complete and he is awake again. And he's finally ready to repair himself, so I'm glad his freezing thing actually worked and it's finally finished. Now, and soon we'll get to see him reconnect with Rogers and likely repair himself for his actions. So it was perfect. However, despite some of the nitpicks I had, I don't think Black Panther's a terrible movie per se, but it's definitely a mixed bag for MCU and the first of Phase 3, and I would definitely have to call it the most overrated film of the MCU. In the end, I would think this movie would probably just have to be a stream it for MCU fans, and maybe if you want to see the Black Panther character again after his debut in Civil War, and to remember the legacy of Chadwick Boseman. Anyway, that's it for my review of Black Panther. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Black Panther, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love the character in both comics and in the Civil War movie, then I would probably just stream this movie online because it's not that memorable as it's just made out to be an average at best. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rate Black Panther, I'm going to give Black Panther a 6.5 out of 10. And there we go. That wraps up my review for Black Panther. And yeah. So, you're wondering, what is gonna be next, huh? Well, I think we'll just, I guess, have to see where next part of the MCU goes. And until then, guys, well, that'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Like this one, see more. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Don G. Corleone. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. Wakanda forever. So, future me's reviewing the Infinity Saga movies, is he? Well, in that case, what's he on? Wow, he's already on Black Panther. So what comes after that? Oh, I know what comes after this. I think he should know what I have in store for my future self. A little nasty surprise. Since our next one is going to be for none other than his favorite MCU movie of all time. Well, I'll review this one myself. I'm coming for you, Don G. Corleone.